survival, so leptin comes first. But with leptin, following leptin, leptin is like the 5-star general, insulin is like the 4-star general. And leptin and insulin are kind of birds of a feather. What dysregulates one tends to dysregulate the other. They're both basically dysregulated by blood sugar surges and dysglycemia. Then comes the adrenals that are affected after leptin and insulin. And the thyroid is oftentimes then a consequence of adrenal dysregulation. The thyroid will sometimes go into dysfunction. You can kind of think of your thyroid as your metabolic engine, so to speak, when it is at idle. Your adrenal manages your metabolic engine when it's engaged, when you're actually doing. Now, if you're doing, or these adrenals are being driven to the ground with the pedal to the metal, doesn't it make sense that the central computer would try to turn down the idle to help you keep from blowing out a gasket? There's a lot of thyroid dysfunction that is born out of adrenal dysregulation, and adrenals are the first thing to look at when your thyroid starts to go south. And autoimmune thyroid, it's another topic for discussion. But it's something to consider. And of course, if you're looking at adrenals, you've got to start looking at these two. A lot of things end up boiling back to blood sugar regulation. And your sex hormones. I mean, these things together are going to be largely dependent upon what's happening further upstream. You can't correct this. I don't care what kind of lotions and potions you're slathering all over yourself, or sublingual this, or I don't know, HRT that. You're never going to get this fixed until you deal with what's underlying it. You can try to manage that the way you manage blood sugar by juggling all day long, or you can go and you can try to deal with things in a more foundational manner and allow your body to self-correct. So blood sugar dysregulation has the potential to ultimately disrupt all of this. Endocrine balance can never occur. I mean, true endocrine balance and health can never occur until blood sugar issues are fully addressed. And then you deal with what's left over. So what are the key strategies? Determine the primary source of the craving issue and address it as needed. Take steps to metabolically adapt to a primarily fat-burning metabolism. Wean off of the common derailing factors, which we'll get to in the next slide. And consider a month-long elimination or detox diet to reset your metabolism and clear out the interfering or derailing factors. What are the common derailing factors? Dietary sources of sugar and starch. Plain and simple. Food sensitivities. Major league. Caffeine and other stimulants, I'm sorry to say, but caffeine does stimulate blood sugar in an upward direction and stimulates your adrenals, and it can kind of get this whole tipping point thing going. Poor sleep habits, insufficient sleep, we know that messes with blood sugar and insulin. And cortisol. Stress, of course, you want to manage the stress in your life because cortisol, again, also is a blood sugar hormone, right? It regulates sugar in an upward direction, which is going to stimulate insulin, which can produce more cortisol. Just an ugly, ugly, vicious cycle. Underlying metabolic issues, you want to look at anemia and chronic infections and food additives, MSG, all kinds of things like that. Get those things dealt with. So what are the supplements used for nutritional support? L-glutamine, if you have hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia, I find L-glutamine is a really, really useful tool. I like to buy it in a powdered form. It tastes fine. It tastes, if anything, slightly sweet, almost like nothing. And you take a little scoop, like a half teaspoon, and throw it under your tongue several times a day. Your brain can use glutamine in lieu of glucose. I look at it as bicycle training wheels. I've had people give me flowers for turning them on to glutamine, honestly. It can just kind of help you not experience the ups and downs so much, and it can help with the cravings, especially when they're related to either hypoglycemic or kind of borderline reactive hypoglycemic issues. There is an herb called Gymnema sylvestre. Now, I'm not a huge herb person, but this is a marvelous tool. What usually the dose is typically 4,000 milligrams or 4 grams 3 times a day. The research seems to show, and my experience seems to bear out. Standard Process makes, their MediHerb line makes a Gymnema sylvestre tablet that is a 4,000 milligram tablet. It's not very big, and it's easy to swallow, and one of those 3 times a day will knock out carb cravings in about 80% of people. You stop thinking about carbs. Now, the other 20%, you know, if you're really addicted, you might find that you end up needing 2 of those tablets 3 times a day. That will take care of most cases of carb craving. And it's a wonderful tool to get through that time period. Again, it's a training wheel thing. You don't need it forever. You just need it for a short period of time. 3 to 6 weeks is the average time span that, in my experience, can convert a person from sugar burning to fat burning. The use of adaptogens for adrenal support to keep, because sometimes the adrenal dysregulation isn't adrenal based, it's brain based. It's that hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis that is dysregulated and causing your cortisol rhythms to get all kittywampus and wonky and whatever. And adaptogens, things like ashwagandha, things like holy basil, rhodiola rhamania, eleuthero, ginseng, that sort of a thing. These are really useful adaptogens for helping to normalize. And liquid forms sometimes work faster for some people than tablet or capsule forms. You just kind of have to play with it and see what works. And there are some different products that I've used that I like, and you know, without advocating specific brands or anything. But I can talk to you about those later if you're interested. But there are lots of different ones to choose from. Sometimes L-tryptophan or 5-HTP, if you think it's related to serotonin issues, you know, some of those things rang true for you, you might try a round of serotonin, or rather tryptophan supplementation. In my book, I talk about how to go about that safely and effectively. You don't just follow the directions on the bottle, please, because you're not going to get anywhere with that. Well, I tried tryptophan, it didn't help me. Well, how much did you take? Well, I took one. It said to take 1 a day. No, it's different for everybody. You're going to have to find the dosage that works for you. But the great news is that you'll know very quickly. You'll know within a day if that's going to be the thing for you or not. B complex, really important. You've got to increase your B complex. I like whole food-based B complexes, but or coenzymated, but whatever B complex you can get your hands on is going to be useful if you're dealing with blood sugar issues. You've got to take more B complex. L-carnitine is an amino acid that, well, no, it's not an amino acid. Actually, it's a quaternary ammonium compound. It's actually more similar to B vitamins than it is to amino acids, but it gets classified as an amino acid all the time. But your body utilizes L-carnitine to move fatty acids into the mitochondria so that they can be burned for energy. So increasing the amount of L-carnitine can increase the efficiency with which you start to burn fat as a primary source of fuel. Some people find it useful. Now, really big doses of carnitine in excess of, you start getting 3,000 to 5,000 milligrams a day or more, sometimes can have an impact on the conversion of T4 to T3 hormone in people who are susceptible to low thyroid, so you might want to go easy on the carnitine if you have thyroid issues. But otherwise, it can be a really useful tool for improving the efficiency with which you're starting to use fats. And coconut oil, of course, we all know. It bypasses the gallbladder. It tends to get absorbed directly into the portal blood and used preferentially for fuel. It's almost used like a carbohydrate. You can't really store the medium-chain triglycerides in coconut oil. You end up using them preferentially for energy. So they're quite energizing in a way that can fuel you while you're trying to, not think about the carb thing. So in conclusion, the ultimate goal should ideally be to remove blood sugar from the mood and cognitive equation altogether and become a fat burner. And more information, you may read my book. Thank you.
Thank you. It is a delight to be here. I just have a wonderful feeling about this conference. There's a great atmosphere here. How many of you are new to these ideas here for the first time? And you're in the right place, because this is the introduction to everything else. So we're delighted to have you and hope you have a wonderful conference. And we're going to get started. I have a tremendous amount of material to present to you, and we may even go a few minutes late on each session, so just bear with me. And I may talk fast. Please hold your questions to the end, and I will stay as late as you like in the afternoon to answer questions. Or if you catch me during the breaks, I'm always happy to answer questions. There's a big buzz about being healthy and about healthy food. It is the subject of the 21st century. But there's a big question. What actually is a healthy diet? You always hear people talking about eating healthily, but just what do they mean when they say a healthy diet? Because what our government says is healthy and what we say is healthy are very different. So what is a healthy diet? Is it the Atkins type diet based on lots of meat? Is it a vegetarian vegan diet, which is very popular today? A lot of claims, amazing claims made about vegetarianism. Or is it one of these other types of dietary schemes, and I do call them schemes, where you have a different diet depending on your blood type or your metabolism, or you have to meticulously count your carbs or your fats, or food combining. I call these schemes, they were all thought up by men who never had to feed a hungry family day after day. And I don't care what your blood type is or your metabolic type. When you sit down to my dinner, you're going to eat what I put in front of you. So, of course, the opposite or the other part of that equation is that what you put in front of them needs to taste good, needs to be delicious. So even Lisa Simpson, who's a very smart little girl, is very confused about what constitutes a healthy diet. We also have the official U.S. government diet, which is popularized with this food pyramid based on 7 to 11 servings of carbohydrate foods every day. And it has led to an epidemic of obesity. This same diet is promoted by another part of USDA as a way of fattening cattle. So they know that this diet is good for making humans or animals fat. And make no mistake, there's no science behind this. These guidelines are not based on science or based on the way any traditional culture eats. But it was put together and designed to promote the products of commodity agriculture. So to answer the question, what is a healthy diet, we need to go back in time to the work of Dr. Weston Price, for whom our foundation is named. He is the author of this wonderful book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, which chronicles his 10 years of studies of isolated traditional cultures. Dr. Price was a dentist. He was one of the foremost dentists of his day. He was head of research for the National Dental Association. He wrote dental textbooks. He wrote a textbook for the Navy. He wrote 1,000 pages on the dangers of root canals. He was a prolific writer and researcher, widely published in peer-reviewed journals. He was a man who asked probing questions. And the question he kept asking himself was, why are my patients so sick? Why am I seeing rampant decay and infection in people's mouths? And even more importantly, why am I seeing people with dental deformities? That was the word he used for crooked teeth, crowded and crooked teeth. Why do I see people who don't have enough room in their jaws for all their teeth, who suffer from overbites and underbites and so forth? And he noted that people who had dental problems invariably suffered from other health problems. So he reasoned that if he could answer the question, what kind of diet promotes good dental health, that same diet would promote good overall health. Now, this was a time back in the early 1930s, late 1920s, when the world was opening up. We had new modes of transportation. We had a new invention called the camera. And there were explorers and anthropologists going to remote corners of the world and studying these isolated peoples. And one of the first observations they made, something that struck them when they entered these communities, was what beautiful teeth people had. Beautiful, broad, straight teeth. The painter George Catlin in the 1800s, who painted Native Americans, described their teeth as broad and straight and white as piano keys. And Dr. Price was hearing the same thing. And you can imagine that this interested him very much, because this is not what he was seeing in his practice. So Dr. Price decided to go on to do a study, which turned out to last 10 years and take him to many different parts of the globe. And he wanted to answer two questions in this study. First of all, was it true